Galactic Meltdown, The Ultimate Betrayal. Chapter 1. Disaster strikes. The airlock hissed open, and Commander Allison Grant stepped aboard the USS Pioneer. She inhaled the sterile scent of the ship's recycled air and gazed up at the vast ceiling of the hangar. The Pioneer was the most advanced spacecraft in the solar system, and the only hope for humanity. Over 200 years had passed since Earth had traversed the stars, and the planet was dying. Global warming, overpopulation, and pollution had exhausted the planet's resources. The governments of the world had united, creating the United Nations of Earth and a special task force, the United Earth Space Agency, to find a new home for humanity. The Pioneer was their last chance for survival. Grant made her way through the sprawling corridors of the Pioneer, passing the lab, the medical bay, and the mess hall. The ship hummed with activity, its crew bustling about, preparing for the mission ahead. She entered the bridge, the heart of the ship. The air hummed with energy as the various consoles beeped and flashed green. Captain Mason greeted her with a nod. "Commander, we're ready." "Good," she replied, strapping herself into her chair. "What's our status?" "Engines are online, life support is stable, and we're currently holding position in low Earth orbit." Grant leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the shimmering blue-green globe beneath them. "All right. Let's get out of here." The Pioneer's engines roared to life, and the ship lurched forward, accelerating at breakneck speed towards the stars. Hours turned to days as they flew beyond the outer reaches of the solar system. The crew worked in shifts, monitoring the ship's various systems and adjusting course when necessary. But then, disaster struck. It happened suddenly and without warning. The Pioneer lurched and shuddered, throwing Grant from her seat. Alarms blared, and the bridge was plunged into darkness. "What the hell was that?" Mason shouted. "I don't know," Grant replied shakily as she got to her feet. "Check the systems." The ship's power was down, and their communication systems were offline. "We've lost all power," Mason said grimly. "The emergency generators are online, but..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Without power, the Pioneer was dead in the water. Grant jabbed at her console, trying to get a reading. "We're adrift. And we have no way to contact Earth." The crew worked tirelessly to restore power, but their efforts were in vain. As they drifted through space, their supplies dwindled, and tensions ran high. Days turned to weeks, and just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they made a discovery that would change everything. They found a strange, glowing object, a portal to another dimension. The Pioneer, adrift and vulnerable, had stumbled upon something that could both save them and destroy them. And they were about to find out which. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Infiltrating the enemy. The Pioneer had been adrift for weeks, their supplies dwindling and morale at an all-time low. But the discovery of the strange object, the portal, had given them a renewed sense of hope. They had no idea where the portal would lead them, but it was their only chance. The crew gathered in the Pioneer's lab, surround the glowing object with caution. It glimmered like a flame, casting an eerie light on their faces. "We don't even know what this is," Mason said. "We could be jumping into certain death. But we could also be jumping into salvation," Grant countered. "We have to take the chance." The decision was unanimous. They had nothing to lose. They stepped into the portal, and the world went black. When they emerged, they found themselves in a vast cavern, their feet sinking into the sandy floor. The walls shimmered with crystals, glinting in the light of their headlamps. As they explored the cavern, they found evidence of a past civilization, ruins of ancient buildings, old machinery, and strange artifacts. They couldn't begin to understand the culture that had once thrived there. But as they delved deeper, they discovered something unsettling, evidence of an active civilization. Strange machines and technologies hinted at an advanced society that still existed within the bowels of the cavern. The Pioneer crew realized that they were not alone, and that there was still much they did not know about this place. They had to proceed with caution. They decided to send a small reconnaissance team to investigate further, led by Grant's second-in-command, Lieutenant Lee. Lee and her team entered the deepest parts of the cavern, where they found a massive underground city. They navigated the labyrinthine tunnels with care, avoiding surveillance systems and automatic defenses. Finally, they came upon a massive chamber, where they found the enemy. The room was alive with activity, droids and machines moving in a synchronized dance. In the center of it all sat a figure, cloaked in black, surrounded by screens and equipment. Lee and her team were careful to stay out of sight, but they soon realized that they had stumbled upon the enemy's secret base. The team returned to the Pioneer, breathless and shaken. They had a new mission: to infiltrate the enemy's base and stop them before it was too late. It would be a dangerous, unprecedented mission, one that could mean the difference between humanity's survival and certain extinction. The crew worked tirelessly to modify their technology, disguising their ship and modifying their equipment to infiltrate the enemy base undetected. It was a high-stakes mission, and the crew knew that their lives were on the line. But they also knew that time was running out, and they had to do everything in their power to save the human race. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The unthinkable betrayal. The Pioneer crew had successfully infiltrated the enemy's secret base, but they knew their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. They worked quickly, planting explosives in key locations and gathering intel on the enemy's plans. But then something happened that they never expected: a betrayal from within their own ranks. The culprit was someone they had all trusted implicitly: Dr. Samantha Miles, the ship's lead scientist. It turned out that Miles had been working with the enemy all along. She had made a deal to ensure her own survival, even if it meant betraying her crewmates and the entire human race. The betrayal devastated the crew, leaving them stunned and vulnerable. But they didn't have time to process their emotions. The mission was still ongoing. With Miles and her team no longer on their side, the Pioneer crew had to rely on their own ingenuity and courage to complete the mission. They pressed on, trying to complete their objectives before the enemy caught on to their presence. But it was a close call. Several times, they were nearly caught. They had to improvise, using their wits and quick reflexes to evade their enemies and complete their objectives. And then came the final showdown. The Pioneer crew had planted the explosives in key locations, crippling the enemy's infrastructure. They made their way to the center of the base, where they faced the enemy commander, a tall, imposing figure in a sleek black suit. The crew was outnumbered and outgunned, but they didn't give up. They fought with everything they had, using every trick in their arsenal to take down the enemy. In the end, it came down to a one-on-one fight between Grant and the enemy commander. The two of them circled each other, fists raised, tension high. But then came the moment of truth, a stunning plot twist that would change everything. The enemy commander pulled off his helmet, revealing his face. And it was a face that Grant knew all too well. It was her brother, Ryan. At first, she couldn't believe it. Ryan had been presumed dead for years, lost in space during a failed mission. But there he was, in the flesh, leading the enemy charge against his own sister and the rest of humanity. Grant was torn. She didn't want to hurt her brother, but she had a duty to protect the human race. In the end, she made the difficult decision to take him down. She fought with everything she had, and in the end, she emerged victorious. But it was a bittersweet victory. She had lost her brother, and her trust in others was shattered. The Pioneer crew returned to their ship, battered and bruised but victorious. They had completed their mission, but at a heavy cost. Their journey wasn't over yet, but they had proven their resilience and their unwavering commitment to the survival of the human race. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Escape from captivity. The Pioneer crew was struggling to come to terms with what had happened. The betrayal of Dr. Miles and the revelation that Grant's own brother had been leading the enemy charge had shaken them to their core. But there was no time for reflection. The Pioneer was still adrift, and they were in enemy territory, they had to get out before it was too late. Their first priority was to avoid detection. They had to stay hidden, using their cloaking technology and other tricks to keep their presence from being noticed. But then disaster struck again. The enemy had somehow managed to jam their communications, rendering them unable to contact Earth or anyone else for help. Now, they were truly alone. As they tried to find a way out, things went from bad to worse. They were ambushed by the enemy, and several crew members were taken captive. Grant knew that the enemy would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, and that meant using her crew members as leverage. But she refused to give up. She had to get her people back, no matter the cost. Grant and the others formed a plan to infiltrate the enemy's stronghold and rescue their crew members. They worked tirelessly, making sure every detail was ironed out. And then they put the plan into action. They snuck into the enemy base, using all their resources to avoid detection. It was a perilous mission, filled with danger and uncertainty. They had to move quickly, as the enemy could discover them at any moment. They finally reached the holding cells, where their teammates were being held. But freeing them was easier said than done. The cells were guarded by heavily armed soldiers and sophisticated security systems. They had to improvise, using their wits and quick reflexes to outsmart the enemy guards and deactivate the security. Finally, they succeeded. They freed their crew members and made a run for it. But they weren't out of the woods yet. The enemy forces were hot on their heels, firing at them from all directions. They ran through the labyrinthine tunnels of the enemy base, dodging attacks and using every trick they had up their sleeves. It all came down to a final, desperate push to make it to the Pioneer. They raced through the corridors, heart-pounding, knowing that their lives were on the line. In the end, they made it. They reached the Pioneer and scrambled on board, slamming the airlock behind them. They were battered and bruised, but they had emerged victorious once again. They had escaped the enemy's clutches and had retrieved their captured crew members. But the victory was bittersweet. They were still adrift, still under attack, and still struggling to find a way to save humanity. The crew knew they had to remain vigilant. The enemy was still out there, and they would stop at nothing to bring them down. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The femme fatale, the Pioneer, had escaped the enemy's clutches, but they were still stranded, unable to contact Earth for assistance. They were in desperate need of supplies, and morale was at an all-time low. But then they received a surprise transmission from an unknown source, a woman who called herself Eva, offering to help them. At first, the crew was hesitant to trust her. They had been burned before. But they were also in dire straits, and they didn't have many other options. They arranged to meet Eva at a remote outpost on a nearby planet. When they arrived, they found a sleek, high-tech facility, unlike anything they had ever seen. Eva greeted them with a cool smile, introducing them to her team of scientists and engineers. She promised to provide them with everything they needed: food, water, medical supplies, and even fuel for their ship. The crew was wary, but desperate. They accepted Eva's offer, and soon found themselves under her care. At first, things seemed to be going well. Eva was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in helping them. But then things started to take a dark turn. They noticed that Eva was always watching them, studying their every move. And then they discovered something unimaginable. She was experimenting on them. Eva had created a serum that she claimed could enhance human abilities, but it came with a terrible price. It caused intense pain and suffering. The crew was horrified. They had trusted Eva, and now they were trapped, her unwilling test subjects. They had to find a way out, but it was easier said than done. Eva and her team had advanced technology and top-tier security, making escape nearly impossible. But then Grant discovered something that would change everything. She learned that Eva had her own agenda, one that involved the destruction of the human race. Eva had been working with the enemy all along, providing them with vital information on human weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The crew knew they had to act fast. They devised a plan to escape the facility and take Eva down once and for all. They worked tirelessly, using every trick they had learned along the way to deceive Eva and her team. They had to move quickly, as the enemy was closing in on them. In the end, they succeeded. They overpowered Eva and her team, disabling their security systems and stealing their technology. But it was a hard-fought victory. The crew was battered and bruised, and they were still a long way from home. They knew they had to keep pressing onwards to find a way to contact Earth, to warn them of the enemy threat, and to keep fighting until they had secured a future for humanity. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Battle of the Galaxy. The Pioneer crew had been through a lot, but they had never faced a challenge quite like this. The enemy was massing its forces, preparing for an all-out assault on the human race. The crew knew that they had to act fast if they wanted to save humanity. They rallied their forces, calling in reinforcements from across the galaxy. The stage was set for an epic battle, a struggle for the fate of the entire galaxy. The Pioneer crew faced off against the enemy in a brutal, no-holds-barred fight. Ships exploded in the vacuum of space, crews fought hand-to-hand combat, and laser beams streaked through the darkness. It was a fight unlike any other, with both sides throwing everything they had into the effort. The Pioneer crew was outnumbered and outgunned, but they never gave up. They fought with everything they had, using their wits and quick reflexes to outsmart the enemy. And then came a moment that would change everything. The Pioneer had developed a new weapon, something that could turn the tide of the battle, a quantum torpedo, capable of destroying entire fleets with a single shot. But using the torpedo was risky. It could mean sacrificing the Pioneer itself, and there was no guarantee of success. The crew deliberated, weighing the risks against the potential reward. And then they made their decision: they would use the quantum torpedo. The Pioneer charged towards the enemy, evading attack after attack, and then they fired the torpedo. It streaked through space, hitting its target with incredible precision. The enemy fleet exploded in a burst of light and dust, the sound of the explosion echoing through the galaxy. The Pioneer had done it. They had destroyed the enemy's main fleet. But the battle wasn't over yet. The enemy still had forces out there, and they would stop at nothing to defeat the human race. The Pioneer crew pressed on, fighting with everything they had. They were exhausted and battered, but they refused to give up. They fought through the pain, the sweat pouring down their faces, until finally, victory was within their grasp. The enemy had been defeated, their plan to wipe out humanity destroyed. The Pioneer crew had emerged victorious. But the cost had been high. The crew had lost many of their own, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Pioneer crew returned to Earth as heroes, but they knew that the battle was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new threats to the human race. But they were ready for whatever came next. They had proven their resilience, their ingenuity, and their unwavering commitment to the survival of the human race. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The final revelation: the Pioneer crew had saved humanity, but they knew that their work was not yet done. They had to find a way to prevent the enemy from ever coming back, to ensure that humanity's future was secure. Their answer came from an unlikely source: Dr. Miles. Miles had been imprisoned after his betrayal, but he had a change of heart. He realized the enormity of what he had done, and he wanted to make it right. He offered the Pioneer crew a final revelation, a secret that could change the course of history. According to Miles, there was a hidden planet, a place that held the key to unlocking humanity's true potential. The planet had been known to only a select few, and it had been kept secret for centuries. Miles had the coordinates and the technology to get there, and he offered them to the Pioneer crew. He believed that this planet could hold the answers they needed, the key to preventing the enemy from ever coming back. The crew was hesitant at first, but then they realized they had nothing to lose. They had risked everything to save humanity, and this was their chance to secure its future. They set off towards the hidden planet, their hearts pounding with anticipation. And then they arrived, touching down on the planet's surface with a sense of awe and wonder. The planet was lush and green, filled with incredible technology and mysteries waiting to be explored. As they delved deeper into the planet, the pioneer crew discovered something incredible, a long-forgotten civilization, one that had been wiped out by an ancient enemy. But this civilization had left behind something incredible, a weapon, one that could destroy the ancient enemy once and for all. The pioneer crew worked tirelessly, using all their resources and knowledge to unlock the potential of the weapon. They knew that the fate of the human race was in their hands. And then came the final battle. The enemy had returned, their forces greater and more powerful than ever before. The pioneer crew stood firm, their weapons ready, their hearts pounding with determination. And then they unleashed the weapon, a blast of force that destroyed the enemy fleet in one fell swoop. The pioneer crew had done it. They had secured humanity's future and defeated the ancient enemy. As they returned to Earth, they knew that they had done something incredible, something that would be celebrated for generations to come. They were heroes, but they knew that their work was never truly done. There would always be new challenges, new threats, new mysteries waiting to be solved. But they were ready. The pioneer crew, humanity's best and brightest, were ready for anything that the universe could throw their way. End of Chapter 7.